Jessie, it's time to go to the store. Jess, I want to remind you to be on good behavior at the store. Not like last week, remember? I'll tell you what, if you're good at the store, I'll buy you a special treat at the checkout counter. Will you be good?
Well.
Okay. I'll buy you 2 treats. Then will you be good?
2 treats? Sure.
Good boy. A deal?
Deal.
So what was it like at your house this week as you introduced the biblical standard of first-time obedience to your children? We trust that you had a great deal of success with your kids as you brought them to the standard. Now, in this particular session, Anne-Marie, we're going to turn the corner and we're going to talk about the process of encouraging our children in motivational discipline.
Right, unfortunately, that sometimes is an area where as parents we are lacking. We're so intent on bringing correction that we forget our children need encouragement and how to do that in a proper biblical way.
And a lot of that encouragement takes place not at the moment of crisis, not at the moment of conflict, but in those moments of non-conflict, reaching way back to that very first lesson. That's probably some of the best time of doing moral training and bringing encouragement into the life of your child. In a few moments, our class is going to be joining us. We're going to be going over their homework. When you're ready, join us and we'll begin this very important lesson. Well, in our last session, we talked about the standard of obedience. I bet you guys had fun in your house this week as you introduced some of these concepts to your children. But there's got to be a reason to bring your child to the standard, especially that standard of obedience that we talked about last week. If there's no parental resolve, if there's no knowledge of how to reinforce those instructions, how to encourage your child, and yes, certainly how to correct your child to the standard, then there's no purpose of having a standard. Where we're going to begin in this particular session is with the outline and a logical progression of biblical discipline. There are many elements of discipline that I want to talk to you about. Let me introduce you to the format of our presentation. You have in front of you an outline, and it has some boxes on it, and we're going to have you fill in those boxes as we progress. But between my lecture time and when Anne-Marie comes up to do the wrap-up, I'm going to have you in that moment, in that time period, transfer all the information in those boxes to your master discipline chart. I know if you see the chart unfold in front of you, you will have a clear direction as to how this thing really looks. You will be able to, more than just see it, you'll be able to have an impression in your mind so that when you need to encourage a child or when you need to correct your child, you'll know exactly where to go mentally on that chart. It will serve as a wonderful guide. Let's get started then with that very first box. I've already got the key word in there. The place to begin is with instruction. We begin our training with parental instruction. Everything starts in child training right at this point. Now, just a couple of basic remarks regarding instruction. You can fill this in on your outline. If you do not verbally instruct your child, how will your child ever know what is expected? As obvious as that is, Anne-Marie and I continually are amazed by the fact that parents so often expect their children to act a certain way in certain situations, but the children have never received any instruction from mom and dad. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to expect. So that is so fundamental. Don't miss it. Number 2, this is very important. If you do not live to the standard of your own instructions, then how much can it really mean to you? If you don't live it, how much can it really mean? And the point is this: both teaching and example are absolutely needed. You need it both in the instruction process. Now, what is required to help children internalize values? Now, just follow this, please, just for a moment. Number one, regarding instruction, you need moral knowledge. Moral knowledge. What does God's moral law say? If we're going to build this moral child, if we're going to motivate them, if we're going to encourage them, then our instructions must include the moral parameters of what is required. So there has to be moral knowledge. What does the Word of God have to say? What are the principles of the Word of God? But number two, just jot this in, the second thing you need is parental example. And of course this ties right back into the 1 and 2 I just gave you. Parental example is vitally important if you're going to help a child internalize values, because the question is this: how valid is the law in the life of those insisting on it? That's what children are asking. If you are instructing your children, if you're saying to your children, look, you need to tell the truth all the time. And then when the phone rings, Dad says to Mom, honey, tell him I'm not home. You have just undermined completely the value of honesty. You see, if you say you are never to steal anything, and you go to an all-you-can-eat salad bar, and Mom orders from the salad bar, but everyone else orders off of the menu, and then Mom brings desserts back from the all-you-can-eat salad bar to everyone, that's stealing. You have just defined what honesty is and what stealing is by your actions. That's why parental example is vitally important, because children measure how valid the law really is in the life of those insisting on it. That includes parents and other authority figures. So the first thing we need to do, if we're going to continue when we have instruction, is to separate then moral behavior from non-moral behavior. You see, not all the activities in your child's day are moral in nature. That is, there are some behaviors that do not simply flow out of the heart, but they're just the natural occurrences of the day. Many behaviors that our children demonstrate come from their heart, but there are many activities of the day that do not. These are activities that are skill-based. For example, learning how to swim, learning to work a computer, learning to bake cookies, learning the piano, learning your multiplication table, learning how to ride a bike. These are non-moral activities. These are activities that represent developmental milestones, developmental skills, mental and physical attributes. So in box number 1, that S1, I want you to write in the word skills. Write in the word skills in box S1. And also, on your outline, would you do me the favor of writing in box B1, behavior? I'll define both of those in a moment. Skills and behavior. Let's talk about skills first of all. You will want to encourage your child's basic talents, his basic skills, basic abilities, basic giftedness. Now, there are 2 ways that you're going to do this. Number 1, in box S2, please write in the word verbal praise. Verbal praise. Something so simple. Let me give you an example of verbal praise. Mother speaking to a son says, great job, Ryan. You picked up all of your toys and you did it so neatly. Or, Ryan, you sat so well in church today. Daddy is so pleased with you. That simple little statement, that's verbal praise. That is something that motivates the child. Also something that motivates a child. Some praise should be linked to cause and effect behavior. Now follow this. Your praise, as often as you can in fact, should be linked to cause and effect behavior. Here's an example of what I mean. Amy, I'm listening to you play the piano and I can tell how much you've improved just by adding 10 minutes a day to your practice time. You see, the cause and effect that we have right here is there is encouragement coming that you are tying back to the child's extra time, the extra effort she's putting in. It's a cause and effect. You are telling her how much she has improved as a result of the extra effort she has put in this case, the extra time she has put in. So let me just summarize this point of praise. You want to encourage your children. You want to encourage them verbally. If you're going to bring out their skills and their talents, their giftedness, learning how to ride a bike, there's got to be plenty of praise, all right? You should have that. Now, there's one more thing. This is true whether you're dealing with skills and talents or whether you're dealing with behavior. Here's a neat little thing to do. praise, verbal praise, takes a quantum leap in the heart of a child. Now follow this. When verbal praise is linked to mom and dad's touch. Let me demonstrate this with Tony right here. If mom and dad goes up to the child after the child has done something wonderful, Anne Marie would do this all the time with the girls. She wouldn't just say, thank you so much, or that was great, or that was wonderful. She would say, I want you to know. She would put her hands right here on their shoulder and just say, I want you to know how much mom appreciates that. When you add the physical touch to it, to the verbal praise, this is taking a quantum leap. Now, dads, listen here. Moms, they do those things, you see. It's almost kind of expected. When you guys do it, when the fathers do it, when you guys praise, number one, but also touch your children, that takes it even further. That is powerful. So you want to encourage your children through verbal praise. Honey, Anne-Marie, when we get to the wrap-up, what I want you to do is I want you to bring in to our conversation how sometimes verbal encouragement or verbal reminders, how that can discourage children. And we should verbally encourage them and verbally remind them as to what they should need to do. But there comes a point when it could be a discouragement. So let's make sure we talk about that. Okay, the second way we're going to encourage life skills is with goal incentives. With goal incentives. Now, what we need to understand about goal incentives is this. Parents use goal incentives to motivate actions associated with non-moral behavior. So S3 is goal incentives. You're going to use goal incentives to motivate actions associated with non-moral behavior, such as, again, skills and natural physical attributes. We lived on a lake in New England, in New Hampshire, where we began to raise our family. Obviously, when you live on a lake, the one thing you want as parents, all the parents on the lake, wanted their children to be water safe. So we started early with Amy and Jenny, teaching them how to swim. And there came the summer of Amy's 3rd birthday. She's just a little gal. And we said to her, if she would swim, learn to swim, from Grandma and Grandpa's dock all the way over to Mommy and Daddy's dock. Now, we're only talking like 20 feet. But that's a lot for a 3-year-old. If she would learn that by the end of the summer, we would buy her that special snorkel set that she's always wanted, and so that she saw in the store. And so what we did is a goal incentive was used to say, Amy, this is a skill. We really want you to learn this. It's a life skill. It's a health skill. We want you to learn this. If you do learn how to swim, we're going to give you that snorkel set. And that child, she worked all summer. She worked to get that little head down in the water and learn how to breathe. And by the end of the summer, she made it. She got her snorkel set. She made it even before the end of the summer. We put the goal incentive out there to get her to accomplish a skill that we wanted her to accomplish. Now, what you have to remember, when you use goal incentives, be careful. They have to be age appropriate. We did not say, Amy, if you learn to swim the length of the lake, we'll give you a new boat. You're not going to do that. Okay? They have to be age appropriate. They have to be according to where the child is developmentally. So goal incentives, follow this on your outline, please. Goal incentives used to motivate behavior are not goal incentives at all. Here's the key word. They're bribes. They're bribes. Now here's what we have to separate here. Bribes, bribing a child, and goal incentives, from a distance, they look very similar, because both goal incentive and bribes are offered before the commencement of an activity. But one is to encourage the development of a natural attribute necessary, or a necessary skill, and the other one is to wrongly motivate a child's behavior. Now listen, I know we touched on this earlier. I want to hit it again. Why is bribing wrong? Number one, on your outline, because God said it was wrong. How's that? In Exodus 23:8, bribes blinds the discerning and perverts the words of the righteous. God said it was wrong. Number two, when you are bribing your child to motivate behavior, when you're offering the candy, when you say to the child, if you're good, I'll give you candy, what you are doing is not appealing to the heart. what you are doing is you're appealing to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. So we don't bribe. But you need to understand a goal incentive. What makes this distinction is that goal incentives are used for non-moral behavior in the process of developing a child's skill or natural attributes. It's not to control behavior. It's not to manipulate behavior. With that distinction made, let's move to box B1, behavior. You should have written that in already. Let's talk about this. We are defining behavior as actions that proceed from the heart. That's how we are defining it. We're separating the natural skills and attributes, learning how to ride a bike, learning how to swim. We're separating those activities out and away from what we are calling moral behavior. Now listen, parents motivate heart behavior by encouraging their children and by correcting their children. Both activities are important, and neither one is truly effective without the other. You need encouragement and you need correction. So from B1, we can go to B2. Please, on B2, write in the word encouragement. Write in the word encouragement. And while you're at it, would you please write in box B3, correction. Correction. How are we going to motivate behavior now? As I just shared with you guys, we're going to encourage our children, and we're going to correct our children. Let's continue with the encouragement side of discipline. Let's talk about encouragement here. Let's face it, each of us enjoys receiving a pat on the back. Every one of us. We all love to hear well done from someone of influence in our life, right? We love it when someone encourages us and tells us that we did the right thing. Don't you think your children also love it? And don't you really think that your children probably need it even more than you because they're in the developmental process of figuring out what life is all about? Our children need this type of encouragement. They are encouraged when justified praise comes their way. So we want to encourage our children to right behavior, and we can do this with, now here's number one, E1, do it with pre-activity encouragement, and also write in box E5, find box E5, and write in post-activity encouragement. Pre-activity encouragement, post-activity encouragement. Let's explain these two basic thoughts. The difference between pre-activity encouragement and post-activity encouragement is the timing of encouragement. That's all. With the first one, we encourage our children in how they should behave. With the second one, we encourage our children as a result of their behavior. That's the only difference between pre-activity and post-activity, but both are absolutely needed. Now let's talk about pre-activity encouragement. What does it look like? In box E2, please write in verbal reminder. Verbal reminder. In box E2, write in verbal reminder, and in box E3, write in dialogue question. Box E2, verbal reminder. Box E3, dialogue question. And while you're at it, do me the favor of writing in box E4, we might as well put it there, positive words. Box E2, write in verbal reminder. Box E3, dialogue question. Box E4, positive words. Let's start with box E2, verbal reminder. You are encouraging your child to do right by reminding them or reminding him of what is expected. Okay? Here are some basic examples of this type of encouragement. Ryan, Mrs. Ezzo is coming over today for lunch. Now, when she comes in the door, I want you to greet her, and remember, you are to say hello while you're looking at her face. Now, that is instruction, that is encouragement, that is a reminder. Mom has been working on a child saying hello, but we got a child that says hello, hello. And so the mom is trying to direct that face to the person so that the moral courtesy is extended. And so now, knowing Mrs. Ezzo is coming over, before the activity, Ryan is being encouraged to do right. It's pre-activity encouragement. Now, by the way, we introduced this back in Lesson 10. This is when, moms, dads, this is when you want to say, now, Ryan, I want to hear a yes, mommy, from you. You want the child's, yes, mommy. You have just given the instructions. Remember, When Mrs. Ezzo comes over, we want you to look in her face when you say hello, right? I need to hear a yes, Mommy. Yes, Mommy. That yes, Mommy helps the child process the previous instruction. That's one of the reasons why a yes, Mommy or a yes, Daddy is so important. It actually is helping the child focus and concentrate on what was said. Let me give you another example. Remember, when we get to the store today, I need both of you children to stand by my side. Here's another example. What am I going to hear from you two? Yes, Mommy. Okay? Now that's pre-activity encouragement. You're going to encourage the child before an event takes place. Now, in both of these examples, again, you are reminding of what is expected. Now, let's move over to box E3, dialogue question. Dialogue question. Box E3. The goal of this form of encouragement is to get your children to tell you what is required. Okay? The first one, you're telling them. This one, you want your children to tell you what is required. You're getting ready to go out to the store, and you're even driving down the road, and you say, all right, children, who can tell me what are the 3 store rules that we talked about? Oh, I can, Mommy. There's no leaving your side, and there's no getting on the carts, and there's no putting our hands in the fruits and the nuts. Okay, you did it. That's very good. Very, very good. Now, the reason why you want that, the advantage of the dialogue question is this. Young children are more apt to take ownership of their behavior if they tell you what the right behavior is to be, what it looks like. You understand? If you ask them the question, say, okay, what are the rules? And if they repeat to you, again, the brain is working, it's coming out of the mouth, they hear themselves speak, they take ownership because they said it. Now, obviously, folks, obviously, this is for the 3-year-olds up to the 7, 8, 9-year-olds, all right? You're not going to do this with your 15-year-olds. Now, what are the rules in this? You're not going to do that. So there's an age appropriateness here, but with the young ones, you will be using that. Now, when they tell you the rules, make sure you encourage and affirm them. Obviously that. Let's go on to encouragement with positive words, box E4. Now, what is this? Listen, folks, this is going to be a challenge. This is a challenge. Because this goes against, I think, our humanity as moms and dads. It goes against our natural propensities because we are so restraint-oriented in our society. So here's the challenge. As often as possible, use positive words to encourage, not negative words to restrain. By that statement, I am not saying don't ever use the word no. I am not saying that negative words are wrong. Negative words are fine. No, ladies and gentlemen, no, if you haven't learned this yet, no is not a bad word. No is a beautiful word. You know what no is? No is the furthest extreme of yes. That's what a no is. No is the furthest extreme of yes. All of this is yes. But there's a boundary out here, and these are all the no's. This is yes. No is the furthest extreme of yes. So I'm not saying get rid of all the negatives. What I am saying, try to encourage with the positive. For example, instead of saying this, instead of don't spill your cereal, young man, on the way to the table, consider saying this. See how careful you can carry your bowl of cereal to the table. Instead of saying don't get out of bed, consider saying obey Mommy and stay in bed. Instead of saying don't hit your sister, consider saying, honey, you need to show kindness to your sister. Instead of saying don't talk so much, say it positively. You know what, honey? You need to learn to be a better listener. Those are the positive words. So let me just summarize positive words with this one proverb. Proverbs 26:24. It speaks of the care we should take in selecting positive words. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. And that's what pleasant words in your home should be like. Now let's move on to box E5. Post-activity encouragement. Post-activity encouragement. Box E5. Now, what does this look like? How do we encourage? We encourage with, in box E6, with affirmation. Affirmation, verbal affirmation. When we talk about post-activity, this is now that we're all done. The child has been good. They stood by our side in the grocery store. They demonstrated wonderful self-control in church. It's after the fact. And so now, when you see that, when you encourage with affirmation. Affirmation. You tell them how much you appreciated it. You share about their right behavior. You encourage that right behavior. Use words of encouragement. But also in E7, you want to use rewards. E7 is rewards. E6 is affirmation. E7 is rewards. Ladies and gentlemen, what we do is we reward behavior. Reward behavior. Let me give you some general comments about rewards. Number one, they are used to motivate behavior. Underline this next word in your outline, please. Not to stimulate. Underline that word. Not stimulate behavior. It's to motivate behavior. Again, we're not going to bribe the child. Here's what rewards sound like. Follow this sentence. Number two. Rewards are because you were good in the store today, not if you will be good in the store today. You know that scenario. I talked to you about it already. Mother's headed out the door, and she's going to bargain with the child. Honey, if you're good in the store today, Mommy's going to buy you the special treat. That is not a reward. That is a bribe. When you put it up front, it becomes a bribe. You should expect good behavior. You shouldn't have to bribe your child for that. That should be normal. That should be what is expected. Number three, rewards can be tangible and non-tangible. That is, it could be a pack of gum or it could be a trip to the park. Very important, number four. Children should be rewarded for their obedience, but not obedient for a reward. Very important. Because that leads to number five. Beware of the condition of reward dependency. What is this? This is the child. It's the silent agreement. It's the backdoor bribe. It's the child who knows every time I go to the store, we don't say anything. Mom and I, we don't say anything. She knows the deal, and I know the deal. I'll give you good behavior. We don't say anything. At the candy counter, you give me something every time. And that's a fair exchange. In other words, the child has become so dependent upon receiving the reward that, in fact, it's just a backdoor bribe. So that means just when your kids are good in the store, you don't want them to think that their goodness has got to be associated with the reward. Sometimes what you're going to do is just say, thank you for being so good in the store. Well, Dad, you're going to buy me something? No, I'll probably hug you in the car, though. That's all you may need to do, because that is what is expected. They're not doing you any favors by being good. This is what our family is all about. Train them to the moral truth. You know why you're good in the store? Because God has allowed our family to be a witness for Him and keep this in their little minds. And so being good is helping you define God to the world, and it's going to help the world find God. Because everyone wants to look, and they notice, and they really love good behavior of other children. They can see the kindness and the gentleness and the respect and the honor, and that draws a lot of people to you, and then they begin to ask you or ask Mommy and Daddy all about it. And so we can then begin to tell them that you are children that belong to God, and we can tell them about the Lord. Let me summarize this. Now, we've talked about the encouragement side of biblical discipline. We're going to have wrap up here in a few moments. In our next session, we're going to pick up with the correction side of biblical discipline. You guys have been waiting so long for this. I know you have. And I hope that you understand that there's been a relationship foundation that's been built, and there's a lot of other factors than just going after your child. But we will be talking about the correction side of biblical discipline in that portion of the chart. Right now, I want you to get ready for the wrap-up. I'm going to have Anne Marie come up here in just a few moments. But I want you to take the information, as I said at the top of the session, contained on your outline in those boxes, and I want you to begin to transfer it to your master flow chart. Okay? Why don't you do that? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Anne Marie to get ready. And, hon, let's do the wrap-up. Well, once again, Anne Marie, I want to welcome you to the wrap-up session and get your insights. Again, we're talking about the encouragement side of biblical discipline, something that we probably do less of, something we need to do more of. So let's talk about this.
Yeah, and we're just beginning the discipline flow chart, but I think I'd like to make a point right up front that as we fill in that chart, this chart is going to be a tool for you. And you need to remember that it's a tool. It does not replace prayer, and it does not replace the wisdom that God's going to give you in dealing with your child. Be something that you can use as you begin to fill in. And it's nice that we started on the positive side with encouragement, because there's more to come. A couple of things. One is just to help you be encouraged to understand what that word actually means. It means to put courage into. And hopefully we're doing that, putting courage into you as parents to fulfill your role as parents, but that's also what you're going to do with your children. You want to encourage them, put the courage into them to do what is right based on God's Word.
Excuse me, let me add to that. Do what is right under adverse situations, because it's going to be, the whole idea is it's easy to do what is right when everything's going fine and with other kids of like-minded, but what about when they have to take a stand? Putting courage into your children to have the moral resolve to continue on the pathway even in front of adversity.
Yeah, that's both ways. It definitely works both ways. Just another reminder as we start the discipline to make sure that you remember that means training. There's more involved in this whole big picture, heart training. The other thing, too, I was thinking about is you were talking about the difference between the goal incentives and the bribes, and another scripture that talks about how poor bribes are is Ecclesiastes 7:7. It says, "A bribe debases the heart." Yes. So, I mean, here we are in the process of attempting to remove that foolishness from our children's hearts and replace it with wisdom, and if we start using techniques like bribing, we're working against ourselves. Right. So it's a motivation to us to be careful.
The form of parenting cannot corrupt the substance of parenting. When you use a bribe, you are corrupting the substance of what you're really trying to get across.
And emphasizing, too, the issue of our words. In Proverbs chapter 25, verse 11, and it's a familiar verse, it says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver." And verse 12 says, "Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise rebuker to an obedient ear." Mm-hmm. And we are that role, hopefully a wise rebuker to our parents, and as parents and for our children, we want them to have that obedient ear that is there. You talked about the importance, particularly of dads when they're giving those words of encouragement, of touching. And I think as moms sometimes, we're with our children all the time, and obviously there are those days when, especially the children that are deciding that today's going to be a good day, and so they're going to obey, and everything's going really nice, and you're just, wonderful child. But there's usually at least one child that's going to give you some grief. And I think on those days when you're really having a rough time with a child, it's going to be important to think, okay, Lord, give me one good thing, please, today that this child is doing right, and make sure you touch that child as well, because they sense when we're struggling, and the fact that we will go that extra measure sometimes can make all the difference in the world in their attitude.
Well, physical encouragement for the little ones right straight up to, even 11, 12, 13 years of age. Well, 13, even 13. Mm-hmm. If you're having that bad day, moms, maybe what you want to do is just go ahead and say, honey, we're having a rough day. Come on over to the couch. Mm-hmm. Let me hold you just for a few moments. Just that. Just hold the child. And that's that type of encouragement. In a sense, it's restoring the relationship through physical touch.
Right. And I'd like to re-look at the illustration that you used with Amy when we gave her that goal incentive, the swimming, because sometimes the question will come up, it's like, well, what if Amy decided she didn't want to swim? Well, first of all, she would never get the snorkel set because she didn't learn the skill. But the other thing, too, is then she did not earn the privilege of being able to go very far into the water because we knew that she wouldn't be safe. So, I mean, there are things, because sometimes a child will do that. They'll say they want to do something, and you might even offer an incentive because you know it's something you want to encourage them in, and then they decide they don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. So they can't have all of the benefits that they might have had they learned that skill. So it's backing up a little bit there. And the other issue, too, because a skill, as you said, is a non-moral area, but children can bring it into a moral area by their attitude, how they are going to respond to your instructions. So even though it might start out as a non-moral issue, the child may make a choice to make it a moral issue, and then you'd have to deal with it in that way.
Riding a bicycle is non-moral. Riding a bicycle into your sister is moral.
It's moral,
You
exactly.
understand? Learning to swim is non-moral. Holding your sister's head under the water is moral.
Right.
So that's where the line is drawn.
Right.
Okay.
And I know you mentioned, too, in the teaching about bringing up about how verbal reminders, part of the chart that we wanted to work on, it can be a discouragement.
Yes.
To particularly your, well, I was going to say particularly to your older children, but once your children even begin to understand that concept of the dialogue question, the verbal reminders and all of that, when your child has proven themselves characterized by doing the right thing, and you continue to remind them, and I think we had that lived out in our own home.
Our children taught this to us.
Right.
This is what we're going to share
And
with
this was, years ago when we first were teaching, and some nights we were, we barely got dinner down and we had to get out of the house. Now the girls were characterized by when we had to leave and the dishes were still on the table and all of that, that when we'd come home, the kitchen was all cleaned up.
Like the house was spotless.
Yeah. But, we would say, oh, girls, would you please make sure the dishes are done? And, we would repeat those sorts of things. And finally they did. They came to us and they said, Mom and Dad, we know what we need to do. And when you continually remind us, it robs them of the joy of wanting to serve.
Because they so much appreciated when we walked through the house, because it was, we know how we left it. And when we walked through that house, and that house was so spotless, they knew the joy in our hearts. And that was when we didn't say anything. So when we would remind them, we would just take that joy away from them, that desire to do without even saying anything. That's where sometimes the verbal reminders, you may go too far with them. Right. That's a great, that was good.
And then just one last thing, particularly again for those of you that do have the older children, don't forget the lesson on love languages. That is a wonderful way to encourage your older children. So through those acts of service and words of encouragement.
Okay. We're not going to revisit the scenario, because the one that we saw at the top of the session, because I think we already got our point across, right? I think you have, honey, with the scriptures, we've taught about this. Don't bribe your children. Don't say, I'll give you some gumdrops if you get up in your high chair. That's bribing. There's a much better way to parent. Let's fine-tune all of this, and let's start taking your questions on this portion of encouragement. And where are we going to begin? Okay, we got it already. Here they go. Right here.
Okay, my question deals with encouragement. We have 3 little girls, and our 5-year-old is really helpful when Mommy has to do something and she takes care of the other 2. She kind of overtakes care of them, becomes busybody. How do we encourage her to, help Mommy out, but discourage the, busybodiness?
First of all, when you're dealing with the female species in that order, you have to understand that there is a natural inclination, even at these early ages. She will assume the role as a second mother, especially if it's the firstborn, right? We're dealing with a firstborn here? Especially if it's the firstborn child. We will naturally assume, or she will naturally assume the role. It's amazing, because the firstborn child really believes that it's Mom, it's you, Dad, and me with these other kids. What do you want to do with them? And so the way you've got to fix it is, yes, you do want them to help you. You do want them to be the older sister. You do want their assistance. But at the same time, you're going to have to constantly remind your daughter that, look, there's one mommy in this family and one daddy in this family. And when we give you a responsibility, you follow it according to our authority, not your authority. Let me get Anne-Marie to jump in on this.
Well, I'm going to take it up a little bit for a few years, because that's definitely deals with it as a 5-year-old. But eventually your children are going to be old enough, your firstborn, to babysit for the younger siblings. And we have some friends that they have a number of children in their family, and this question comes up quite often. How do you do that without the older child then taking that responsibility, which you want them to have, but then when Mom and Dad come back home, that's not theirs anymore to keep, and plus you don't want them bossing their younger siblings. And they actually basically had a transfer of authority. When they were going to go out for the evening, or even if it was during the day, they would make it very clear to the younger children, your sister is in charge. It's as if mommy and daddy were here, and you are to listen to your sister like you would us. Then when they came home, they made very transfer of authority back to mom and dad with that older child. Now, if it was during the day, obviously the other kids were still awake, but if, let's just say they were all in bed, we are home now, and we appreciate your help, but now we are back in charge. And that really eliminated a lot of that propensity that the firstborn particularly has in wanting to take charge of everything.
Right. Okay. Other questions? Right, let's go back over here. Angela.
My friend uses a star chart for good behavior. For instance, her son, anytime that he cleans his room each day, he gets a star. At the end of the week, they go out for ice cream. Do you recommend this, or is this something we should avoid?
Well, first of all, star charts are a lot of fun. We say priming the pump to get a behavior, to get a child used to a pattern. But the question is this: if you're going to put a star up every day for whatever it may, make your room, feed your goldfish, I said make your room, make your bed, feed your goldfish, clean your room, whatever it may be. What is going to happen when Dad doesn't take the child out for ice cream on Saturday? Will the child do it? See, that's really the test of the star charts. Again, Anne-Marie and I would say, look, a lot of fun to get a pattern going, but if you're going to rely upon it to motivate behavior, ultimately it's almost a backdoor bribe. Now, there is a way you can use a star chart effectively. So it's going to be, instead of saying, if you do this, we'll give you this. Anne-Marie, we had a situation with our little friend Shane. Now, Shane's mom came up with a very clever way of using a star chart.
Yeah, she was trying to work on helping him gain some self-control. And so the chart was made with not only self-control, but some other aspects of character that Mom was working on with both he and his sister. And so those were listed. And as Mom saw that the child was exercising self-control or doing kindness or whatever it was on that chart, then she would put, you know, a star up there. So you were, in essence, really rewarding the right behavior. We have some friends that live in Houston, and they came up with a really neat idea.
This is real good.
They have two jars. One is full of marbles, and the other one is empty. And as anyone in the family sees another person doing a kind deed or just something that they're working on.
Mom, dad, sibling.
Right. They take that and put it in the other jar. And then when the other jar is full, then they all do something together as a family. So, I mean, there's lots of ways you can use little tools to help motivate and encourage right behavior.
But in a true sense, that's at the end. That is the reward. That's at the end, not before. That's not if you are good or if you do this, but as a result of seeing your behavior, that's bringing the reward in properly afterwards. Okay? Let's, who else? Okay. Let's take the mic and go over to Janine.
My question goes back to a little bit of what Carl was talking about with siblings encouraging, or, well, I guess it's more with a sibling encouraging another sibling. How do you deal with the older child wanting to encourage their younger sister to do what is right, and you're out of the room, and the younger sibling is not? And so the younger sibling just comes in tears going, they're just nagging me. And that's the scenario. I mean, you know, should we just continue encouraging the oldest to, I mean, she wants her sister to do what's right, but it's provoking her sister, so who do we work on, you know?
Honey, because you had younger sisters.
That's really, it's probably a combination of both, because on the one hand, you definitely want your siblings to provoke one another to love and good works. And you want your siblings, if they see, especially the older ones, if they see the younger ones going to do something wrong, you want them to take that initiative to say, you know, that isn't the right thing to do. I'll just use the example of you're teaching your kids the yes, mommy, yes, daddy. So your older children have that down. The younger ones are coming along, and so you call a younger child. It is wonderful to see the older siblings say, oh, go ahead, mommy's calling you. Say yes, mommy, and go. I mean, and provoking them in that way. But then again, it's going to be so much of you as the parent realizing, okay, is the older sibling truly trying to provoke to love and good works, or is there a characterization where she's trying to direct everybody's life in the home. So you have to teach into that. And with the younger one, it's a matter, too, of teaching. It's like, no, your sister is trying to encourage you to do right or to help you to do the right thing. And you should be thankful. She's not trying to get you into trouble. Help her to see the positive side of that. But it's a teaching from both sides. There's so much teaching. You didn't know you were such teachers, did you?
Right. It's active. It's discipleship, training. I think, Kathy, you had a question?
My question has to do with the bribing, the goal incentive. What is this? I have a thumbsucker, and actually she's no longer a thumbsucker. It's a success story. But my question is, when the scenario is this, when when I wanted her to stop sucking her thumb, she wanted this doll, and I showed her this doll before we began this process and said, you know, I would like to give you this doll. Here it is. Give her a hug, put her back in the box, and for a month I want to see you exhibit self-control on the issue of not sucking your thumb anymore. And you know what? It worked. In a month's time, she is no longer sucking her thumb completely, you guys. Now, was that a bribe? Was that a goal incentive? What is this?
This is important for all of you. We're going to reach back to a very important word in parenting. One we gave you in the very first lesson, context. The second most important word we're going to give you in parenting is characterization. In this case, characterization of mom's behavior. The very fact, Kathy, that you are not characterized by being a bribing parent is what allows you the freedom to do something just like that. If you did this with everything to control or manipulate or to motivate behavior, now we're into bribing seriously. But the very fact that you used your wisdom, knowing your limitations, knowing what you can and cannot do, you properly exercise it. And again, for all of you, it's like we get back to when we said, look, we're all bribing parents. Anne-Marie and I were bribing parents. We're all threatening repeating parents. Anne-Marie and I were threatening repeating parents. We all do these things. It's, Lord, by your grace, show me how to pull them all in, harness them, control them. And just knowing your family, I know that's the case with you. So yes, that in the letter of the law, could we say that was a bribe or could we say that was a goal incentive? Well, it all depends. It really, in one sense, it really doesn't matter because you're not characterized by it. It accomplished the goal, you achieved it, and that's all.
And that's really a good thing because especially thumb sucking or any habit like that, see, part of the problem is we let them do that for the period of time, so it really becomes a habit of theirs. And so I know I would tend to look at, nail biting, thumb sucking, anything that a habit that we as parents that have allowed our children to continue in, something like that is a goal incentive because we are just as responsible in one sense as the children are. So, to us, we thought, good job.
Okay. Hunt, some final thoughts from you.
Well, hopefully at the end of this lesson, you are encouraged, and there is a lot to work through and do your homework this week. Come back next week.
And next week we're going to get into now, honey, we're going to start the process, the correction side of discipline, correcting your child, correcting that behavior. Where do you begin? What is the big picture? We're going to continue with the flow chart. Thanks for joining us in this session. Dessert time now. Let's have some food. Let's be Christian. Okay.